What's good, everybody? You already know it's the real AG here on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network, and I gotta tell y'all, I am freaking excited to finally be doing this video. As you know, our hit squad has been bringing you week in, week out content covering each and every team across the league as we look ahead to 2025. We are finally into the AFC West, which means I can finally talk about you know who. That's right. You either love them, you hate them, or you just can't stand them. But the fact remains, you got to deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to look at, what they did in this offseason and what is to be expected or what is lying ahead for the 2025 season. So, quick recap to 2024. I'm sure more than half of the country was ecstatic. I know of a select few that were gloating for sure about that Super Bowl loss the Chiefs took to the Eagles. Certainly was in a more on the embarrassing side of things, but fact remains it was about as good of a season as you can get if you're a Chiefs fan or just a fan of good football. They went 15-2 overall, first in the AFC West again for their 9th straight division title, and almost became the first team in league history, or maybe I won't say almost. They had the opportunity. Let's put it that way for all you comment haters out there. But they were almost the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls. And for a time when it was tough to be a Chiefs fan, it's pretty dang awesome right now, and they continue to be successful despite constantly making changes, or losing players, or losing coaches, and everyone thinks they're going to step back, and they're still there. So, first and foremost, let me just, start this little preseason preview video by saying, basically, until the Chiefs get knocked off, you can account for them to be up towards the top. Until that doesn't happen at this point, in this Mahomes, Andy Reid dynasty, they have been successful year in and year out, and there's really no reason to doubt that right now. So, looking at what moves they made to head into 2025, they're actually pretty active in terms of retaining a lot of key players, adding some potential upside pieces in free agency, and addressing a lot of needs in the draft. So, first and foremost, looking at kind of the key cog players they kept around through re-signs. Obviously re-signed linebacker Nick Bolton, your green dot, heart of the defense, MIZ made linebacker, 3 years, $45 million. Re-signed Marquise Hollywood Brown, 1 year up to $11 million with incentives. Re-signed edge rusher Charles Omenihu, 1 year up to $7 million. Re-signed Kareem Hunt, 1 year, $1.5 million. Re-signed wide receiver Juju for 1 year. Re-signed QB Bailey Zappi for 1 year. Re-signed punter Matt Ariza, and then ultimately, did franchise tag Trey Smith, but then turned around and gave him a big old bag of 4 years, $94 million deal, $70 million guaranteed, which ultimately makes him the highest paid offensive guard in the NFL. So big shout out to T. Smith for a 6th-round pick to be in highest paid. It's an excellent story, and a guy I'm definitely glad to see staying in the red and gold. And then they also re-signed George Karlaftis, who I had 1 more year on his rookie deal, but went ahead and got his extension out of the way. 4 year, $93 million, $62 million guaranteed. So, like I said, pretty active in terms of retaining a lot of key pieces to the machine here. Then on the other side of the coin in free agency, kind of hit the ground running and trying to address some needs with some big signings. Obviously see who they signed here up at the top. Big one, offensive tackle Jalen Moore from San Francisco, 2 years, $30 million. Have signed cornerback Christian Fulton from the Chargers for 2 years, $20 million. Signed running back Elijah Mitchell, 1 year, 2.5. Signed Gardner Mustache Minshew, 1 year. Signed D tackle Terry Gillery, I'm going to call him that, for 1 year. Signed Robert Rochelle, cornerback, for 1 year. Re-signed or brought Mike Pennell back, and signed tight end journeyman Robert Tunyon. But like I said, hit the ground running, answering some questions. So my big ticket free agent signings. First and foremost, obviously has to be Jalen Moore, the left tackle that they signed from San Francisco. Like I said, they hit the free agency period, basically trying to answer the biggest question they had looming as to who would be the left tackle moving forward. I mean, they've been desperately trying to find their franchise guy since, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but since Eric Fisher left or retired or went to the Colts and then retired, whichever happened. But they've been trying to answer that question for some time now. And, point proven last year in a uberly successful season, they had 4 guys starting at left tackle, with the fourth one being your all-pro guard Joe Thuney that you slid over and just kind of looked like a stopgap. So they desperately needed to improve or just add viable competition. You do that with Jalen Moore. The only risk here is he was mostly a backup in his time at San Francisco, only had 12 starts in his career, 5 of those being in 2024. But, you need either him or other additions they've made in this offseason to be a clear upgrade over, Kingsley Suamataia or Wanye Morris, who they tried to experiment with last year. So, that's a big impactful signing. Then obviously you got cornerback Christian Fulton, who they brought over from the Chargers. Again, they desperately needed depth at cornerback. And you look at the upside with Fulton, he does have starter experience, which can be paired with McDuffie and then give you the flexibility of potentially being able to move McDuffie around a little bit more than they could last year once they moved on from Snead. Maybe put him back in the slot coverage spot, which is something he absolutely excelled at in 2023. But again, you get that versatility, you get someone with experience. But like with Jalen Moore, Fulton has his own injury concerns because he's never played more than 15 games in any of his 5 seasons. So, again, potential high risk, high reward situation there with both of those. And then to round it out to the same theme here, the other impactful signing, in my opinion, is running back Elijah Mitchell. And I think it's just, you look back at last year, again, 15-2 season, and Kansas City got everything they could out of Kareem Hunt, who they brought in off the street once Pacheco went down. And, it's just not realistic to expect you get that same type of return in back-to-back years should something happen. So they desperately needed to add some depth at running back and some experience depth at that. And that is what you get with Mitchell. He does have experience being a starter or playing in the NFL. But again, he has the injury concerns like the other 2 guys carried, are just not starting. But, he had a stellar rookie year in 2021 and then has just kind of been unable to stay in a lineup for any long period of time. So, again, another high risk, high reward. But with Mitchell, you cannot deny his speed or ability to move the football when healthy. So you got to hope, you could take a shot and maybe a change of scenery helps him out in that regard. But those are my 3 big free agency signings. Then moving on to the draft. First and foremost, I thought the Chiefs did a tremendous job in the draft. Overall, just solid draft, gave it an A- grade, trying to be as unbiased as possible. But I love all the picks they made. They had a great first round for picking at the bottom like they usually do. They added quality D-line depth, which they needed, and, got some great value picks later in the draft. But, I gave it an A- because I don't know that they fully answered the offensive line questions that were burning, going into the offseason. But just kind of top to bottom, listen to picks. First round, you got Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State. Second round, D tackle Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee. Third round, Ashton Gillette, the edge rusher out of Louisville. And then third round again, they took Noel Williams, corner out of Cal. Fourth round, wide receiver Jalen Royals out of Utah State. Fifth round, linebacker Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. And to round things out in the 7th round, didn't mean to say that twice there, but took running back Brashard Smith out of SMU. So looking at kind of the big picks here, again, it's really got to be the 2 at the top because those are the 2 biggest potential to be immediate impact. First and foremost, that's Josh Simmons. Again, high risk, high reward type pick because, he was potentially the best offensive tackle in the draft, but for an injury and wouldn't have even been available, but for that injury. So, you're potentially getting your franchise guy at pick 32 and someone that, barring any health concerns, can come in and immediately compete for that spot and, push the free agent that they brought in Jalen Moore. And from what I've seen so far in camp, Simmons has been as advertised, and they're pretty excited with what they got. And as a Chiefs fan, you got to be pretty excited too with that, because they might potentially have their guy protecting Mahomes for the rest of his time in KC. And then, my other big pick has got to be Omar Norman Lott. Again, kind of a high risk, high reward move in the second round, but love the type of player they brought in. He's arguably the best true pass rushing D tackle in the class. I mean, he had an 18.9% pass rush win rate in college and an 88.3 pass rush grade per PFF standards. And that's just something that they desperately needed to add to complement what they have left in Chris Jones and replace what they lost with Rashawn Wharton going to Carolina. So with Norman Lott, you get a guy that has all the tangibles to immediately come in and produce and kind of be the Robin to Chris Jones's Batman. It's just a matter of how quickly they let him go feast, out in them trenches, I guess. But kind of with Simmons, everything you're seeing out of him in camp is, he's been as advertised, and a pleasant surprise at where he's at this stage in the, preseason here. So, looking at the other moves that were made, really they were pretty quiet in terms of trades. Our coaching changes, kind of some minor coaching staff changes, but nothing big. Brought a lot of the same players back. But they did trade the offensive guard Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears for a 2026 fourth rounder. And I understand why they did it. Last year of his contract, get something back in return, and allows them to free up a guard spot for some of these younger offensive linemen they've spent draft capital on. So understand why they did it. It's still just to be determined how much of an impact someone like Thuney, an all-pro, stalwart all-pro guard and veteran, how that will change the dynamics of this O-line room moving forward. But, got to understand why they did it from a franchise perspective, first and foremost. So, looking at the schedule quickly here, is pretty run-of-the-mill Chiefs schedule. A lot of big opponents, a lot of primetime games. They have the 11th hardest strength of schedule. Vegas win total is at 11.5 games. Like I said, 7 primetime games. I believe I made a video earlier in the year, saying I understand why people may be a little upset at the Chiefs because they're just always on your TV, and I get it. But it's pretty awesome as a fan just to know that you're always going to be able to watch their games. Just kind of looking at the schedule as a whole, they definitely have some tough home game opponents. Just looking at Philly, Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, Houston, as well as their AFC West opponents. Tough draw in Arrowhead. The biggest games I think I'm circling, first and foremost, week 1, AFC West matchup in Brazil. Week 2, Super Bowl rematch against Philly in Arrowhead. Week 8, you got a potential exciting Commanders matchup. And then, week 9, we got that always fun bout, if you will, against the Buffalo Bills in the regular season. But yeah, in my opinion, the toughest stretch of this schedule is really got to be weeks 1 through 4, taking outside the New York Giants. Pretty big test right there, playing AFC West opponent, reigning Super Bowl champ, and an AFC North team that's been knocking on the door for years. And then you look at weeks 14 through 18. I mean, that's arguably where the AFC West gets decided, because you got Houston, then you play all of your AFC West opponents to round out the year there. So, like I said, tough schedule, but nothing they aren't used to with kind of how successful they've been in years past. So, my overall offseason grade for the Chiefs is a B+. Like I said, they still kind of left some questions, retained all their key players, in my opinion, seemed to have a solid draft haul, and, seemed to potentially address the needs that were needed in the O-line room. But, my concerns, like I said, mainly just what impact will the departure of Joe Thuney have on the offensive line and just progressing those young guys. What impact will the departure of Justin Reed, the safety, have with the secondary? And can Jalen Hicks be that guy to come in and almost not skip a beat in terms of who's out there? And then, did they fully address their receiver depth, just given some injury concerns with guys that have been on the roster, as well as probably anticipated Rashee Rice suspension, just kind of with the news that's been breaking in the last few weeks here. But you can see my overall prediction. Love it, hate it, I don't care. Like I said, until somebody knocks the Chiefs off or they just totally fall flat on their face and have an abysmal year, I don't really see how they're not going to always be in the run as long as you have a healthy Mahomes and Andy Reid at the helm, just chopping up opposing defenses. So overall predictions 13-4. I won't go through the schedule all the way because I've definitely done it before in videos, but I will say it's changed. If you go back and look at my schedule release video, I did give them an extra win just because I felt like it. But I got the losses for the Chiefs, all four of them, being week 4 against Baltimore. That was a close 1-point game last year, and I think Baltimore comes into Arrowhead ready to play. I got them losing week 9 to Buffalo just because that's what seems to happen in the regular season. That's the Bills' Super Bowl right there. I got them losing to the Chargers week 15. I continue to stand on that. I think the AFC West is certainly going to be a tough division this year, but Kansas City has been able to prevail in years past in that similar climate. So until something happens, I have faith in them. And then I do have them losing to the Broncos in week 17 again at Arrowhead. But that's my overall preview for 2025 for the Chiefs and just predictions looking at the schedule and just looking ahead. As always, ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. Chiefs Kingdom, let me hear you in the comments. Chiefs haters, yeah, I guess we can hear you too. Let me know your thoughts and concerns on this content today. If you want to get at me or anyone else in the Hit Squad, there's our info on social. If you want to find more Lockdown Defense content, boom, you got it right there. Get at us anywhere and everywhere on the line, as they say. But yeah, that wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I'm the real AG. We just talked my Kansas City Chiefs, and we'll see how right I will be at the end of this year. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you. And as always, make sure y'all out there stepping it up and playing that lockdown defense, baby.